Welcome back to the deep dive. I'm glad you're here because today we are taking a sledgehammer to one of the most cherished statues in our cultural museum.
We certainly are.
We're talking about the self-made man.
It's the ultimate American and really the global mythos, isn't it? This idea that success is this solitary journey.
Right.
That if you just have the grit, the IQ, and the sheer determination, you can rise from the bottom to the top. And that the only variable that really truly matters is you.
Exactly. We grow up on these stories. You know, the billionaire who started in a garage, the athlete who practiced while everyone else was sleeping. And look, we aren't here to say hard work doesn't exist. It absolutely does.
Not at all. Hard work is non-negotiable.
Cool.
But the research we've got in front of us today, specifically looking at Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers, alongside some really fascinating sociological data, it suggests that our formula for success is missing about half the variables.
We're looking at what you call the ecology of success.
Exactly. If you want to understand why a particular tree grows to be 100 feet tall, you don't just look at the seed it came from.
You can't.
You have to look at the soil, the amount of sunlight, the other trees that are blocking the wind, the rabbits that might be chewing the bark. Success, it turns out, is an environmental phenomenon just as much as it is an individual one.
And to prove it, we're going to go on a bit of a world tour today. We've got Canadian hockey rinks, Jewish law firms in 1950s Manhattan, rice paddies in China, and a very, very strange little town in Pennsylvania called Roseto.
Ah, Roseto. It is the perfect place to start. It is the hook that really pulls this whole theory together.
So set the scene for us. It's the 1950s.
The 1950s. We're in the foothills of Pennsylvania, right? Roseto is this tiny insular town founded almost entirely by immigrants from a single village in Italy, Roseto Valfortore.
Wow.
It was essentially a slice of southern Italy just dropped into a slate quarry in PA.
And this physician, a man named Stuart Wolfe, he stumbles upon something that, medically speaking, just shouldn't be happening.
It was a complete anomaly. I mean, you have to remember, the 1950s, heart disease in the United States was rampant. It was an epidemic.
A huge killer.
A huge killer. Men in their 50s and 60s were just dropping dead of heart attacks left and right. It was the leading cause of death for men under 65.
But not in Roseto.
Not in Roseto. Wolfe looks at the death certificates and he realizes virtually no one under the age of 55 is dying of a heart attack here.
That's incredible.
And for men over 65, the death rate was half the national average. And it wasn't just heart attacks. No suicide, no alcoholism, no drug addiction, no ulcers. People were just dying of old age.
So naturally, the medical community assumes these people must be living like monks. They're running marathons and eating kale or something.
That is exactly what Wolfe assumed. He brings in this whole team from the University of Oklahoma. They run all the studies, they do the interviews, and what they find is, well, it's a cardiologist's nightmare.
I was looking at the notes on their diet. It is aggressive.
It is incredible. They weren't cooking with olive oil like they did back in the old country. That was too expensive to import.
So what were they using?
They were cooking with lard.
Lard.
They were eating pizza, but not the thin, airy Italian kind. This was thick, heavy dough, loaded with sausage, pepperoni, salami, ham, and eggs.
Good grief.
They ate sweets all year round. Wolfe calculated that 41% of their calories came from fat.
41%. Okay, so they're eating lard and sausage. They must be exercising like crazy to burn all of that off.
Nope. They smoked heavily. Many were struggling with obesity. They weren't, joining gyms or doing yoga. They were working in the slate quarries, which is hard work, but not exceptionally so.
So diet is out, exercise is out. It has to be genetics, right? Some kind of super gene from that one village in Italy.
That was the next logical step. So Wolfe thought of that. He tracked down relatives of the Rosetons who had moved to other parts of the U.S., to New Jersey, to New York. They shared the exact same gene pool. But once they left Roseto, their heart disease rates skyrocketed right up to the national average.
That is the smoking gun. It is not the DNA. It's the place.
It's the place. Wolfe even checked the neighboring towns, Bangor and Nazareth. Same water supply, same climate, same kind of hardworking European immigrant demographic. But the death rates there were 3 times higher than in Roseto.
So Wolfe has eliminated everything that makes medical sense. Diet, exercise, genes, geography. What is left?
The culture. Wolfe and a sociologist named John Brune started just walking the town.
Yeah.
And they realized the magic wasn't in the people. It was between the people.
The Pisani culture, as they called it.
Precisely. They noticed how the Rosetons lived their lives. You'd see people stopping to chat in Italian on every single street corner. They had 3 generations living under one roof.
Which is huge for stress reduction, right? You're not isolated in a nursing home. You're an elder. You're respected. You're integrated into daily life.
Exactly. They all went to Mass. They had 22 separate civic organizations for a town of just 2,000 people.
22.
That density of social connection is almost unheard of today. But the most important thing they found was the ethos. The town was deeply egalitarian.
Meaning the rich didn't act rich.
Right. If you had some money, you didn't flaunt it with a Cadillac and a giant house. You drove a Ford. And if you were struggling, the community would kind of rally to obscure your failure. The pressure was just off. Wolf concluded that the Rositans were healthy because they were emotionally secure. They were insulated from the pressures of the modern world by this powerful web of community.
And that brings us right to the thesis of this deep dive. The Rositans didn't live longer because of their individual choices.
Right.
They lived longer because of their ecology.
And if health is an ecology, then success is too. We tend to think of success as, I worked hard, I studied, I won. But what if, like the Rositans, your success is actually determined by the hidden advantages and the invisible structures of the world you inhabit?
Let's test that theory. And I want to start with something that feels totally meritocratic on the surface. Sports. Specifically, Canadian hockey.
The iron law of Canadian hockey. This is one of my favorite examples because it's so stark, so undeniable.
It really is. So we're looking at the roster of the 2007 Medicine Hat Tigers. This is a major junior. A hockey team, the elite of the elite. These are the kids who are getting drafted into the NHL.
The best of the best.
If you believe in the self-made myth, these should just be the 25 best, most talented hockey players in that region, period.
You'd expect a totally random distribution of birthdays, right?
Right.
A kid born in July should be just as likely to be talented as a kid born in January.
But that is not what the roster says at all.
No. When you actually look at the birthdays, it is bizarre. Out of 25 players on the team, 17 were born in January, February, March, or April.
17 out of 25 in the first 4 months of the year.
And here's the kicker. Practically no one was born in October, November, or December. It's an insane statistical skew.
Is this just a fluke with the Medicine Hat Tigers? Some weird coincidence?
Not at all. This pattern replicates across the entire Ontario Junior Hockey League. It replicates in the NHL. It's everywhere at elite hockey. If you're an elite hockey player in Canada, there's a 40% chance you were born in the first quarter of the year.
And the last quarter.
There's only a 10% chance you were born in the fourth quarter.
Okay, so unless Capricorns and Aquariuses are genetically predisposed to skating backwards, something systemic is happening here.
It's not astrology, it's bureaucracy. It's the eligibility cutoff date. In Canada, the cutoff for age class hockey is January 1st.
Break that down for us. Why does a date on a calendar end up determining a professional career?
Okay, so imagine you're a coach and you're looking at a group of 10-year-olds for a travel team, a rep squad. You have one kid, let's call him Alan, born on January 2nd. He just turned 10. You have another kid, Bob, who was born on December 30th. He also just turned 10. They are in the same league, trying out for the same team.
But Alan is literally almost 12 months older than Bob.
At age 10, a year of physical maturity is massive. It's a huge percentage of your entire life. So Alan is likely to be taller, heavier, stronger, and more coordinated simply because he's been alive 10% longer than Bob.
But the coach doesn't see older. The coach sees talented.
Exactly. The coach confuses maturity for ability. He says, wow, that Alan kid, he's a natural. So Alan gets picked for the rep team, the all-star squad. And this is where the ecology kicks in. This is what's called a cumulative advantage.
Sociologists call this the Matthew effect, right? From that vice in the Bible.
For unto everyone that hath shall be given, and he shall have abundance. It's the perfect description. Because Alan got picked at age 10, he now gets better coaching. He plays 75 games a season instead of just 20. He practices twice as much against better competition.
So by the time Alan and Bob are 14, Alan actually is better. It's no longer an illusion.
He's miles better. But he didn't start better. He started older. The system took a tiny, arbitrary advantage, a birth date, and compounded it year after year after year until it became a completely insurmountable gap.
And the tragedy is Bob, the kid born in December. He might have had the exact same innate talent, maybe even better hands or vision on the ice.
Could have been the next Wayne Gretzky.
But because he was small at age 10, he got cut, he stayed in the house league, got worse coaching, practiced less, and eventually he probably quit.
We are effectively weeding out half the population's talent based on an administrative deadline.
Hmm.
And it's not just hockey. You see this in European soccer, where the cutoff is often August 1st.
Mm-hmm.
The Czech national team, at one point, didn't have a single player born in the second half of the year.
It is wild to think about the economic and social cost of that. How many Wayne Gretzkys never even played pro just because they were born in November?
And it gets worse. This exact same effect bleeds into education. Two economists, Bedard and Dewey, looked at TIMSS scores. That's a big international math and science test for fourth graders.
Okay.
They found that the oldest children in the class scored between 4 and 12 percentile points higher than the youngest children in the same class.
That is the difference between being put in the gifted track and the normal track.
And once you're on that track, you are on the train. The gifted kids get the better teachers, the extra stimulation, and guess what? By the time college applications roll around, the oldest kids are significantly overrepresented in four-year colleges.
So we've built a society where we accidentally penalize people for being born at the end of the year, and we pat the January kids on the back and tell them they're geniuses.
The only country that seems to have really figured this out is Denmark. They don't do ability grouping, streaming kids into smart or dumb groups until age 10 or later. They wait for those maturity differences to even out.
That just seems so obvious. Why don't we do that?
Because we are addicted to the idea of innate talent. We want to believe that talent shines through immediately. We don't want to admit that so much of early success is mostly just timing.
Okay, so timing is the first pillar of this new theory of success. But surely, at some point, you have to put in the work. You can be born on January 1st, but if you don't practice, you're not going to the NHL.
Absolutely. And this brings us to the second pillar, the concept of work. But even here, the story isn't quite what we think it is. We need to talk about the 10,000-hour rule.
This is probably the most famous concept to come out of Outliers. And it comes from a study by a psychologist, K. Anders Ericsson, at the Berlin Academy of Music.
Right. Ericsson wanted to know what separated the truly elite violinists from the merely good ones and the ones who are just going to end up as music teachers.
So he asked them all a simple question.
A very simple question. Over the course of your entire career, ever since you first picked up the violin, how many hours have you practiced?
And the results were shockingly consistent.
They were. There were no naturals. There wasn't a single person who floated to the top on pure talent,
Right.
while only putting in a fraction of the practice.
I...
And conversely, there were no grinds. People who worked harder than everyone else but just couldn't cut it. The talent wasn't there. That didn't exist either.
It was a direct correlation.
It was pure math. By age 20, the elite performers had all totaled 10,000 hours of practice. The good students had about 8,000. The future music teachers had just over 4,000.
So the magic number for true world-class mastery seems to be 10,000 hours.
That seems to be the threshold for the brain to truly assimilate a complex skill, whether it's chess or fiction writing or coding or playing the violin. But here's the catch, and this is where the self-made myth starts to crumble again.
Because 10,000 hours is a lot of time.
It's an enormous amount of time. To put in perspective, it's roughly 3 hours a day, every single day, for 10 straight years.
You can't do that if you're working a full-time job at Starbucks to pay your rent.
You can't do it if you're poor. You can't do it if you have to support your siblings. You need a support system. You need parents who pay the bills. You need access to the equipment and the facilities. The 10,000-hour rule tells us that expertise isn't just about willingness, it's about opportunity.
Let's look at a concrete example. Bill Joy.
Bill Joy, the Edison of the Internet, co-founder of Sun Microsystems, he rewrote Java, were the core of the UNX operating system. A true legend in Silicon Valley.
The standard story is that Bill Joy was just a computer genius who appeared out of nowhere.
But let's look at his ecology. He arrived at the University of Michigan in 1971. Now, why do that specific year and that specific location matter so much?
Because in 1971, computing usually meant punch cards.
Right. At most universities, if you wanted to code, you walked to the computer center with a stack of cardboard cards. You handed them to an operator, they fed them to a massive mainframe, and you came back hours later to see the results.
And if you miss a single comma, the whole program failed and you had to start all over again.
It was agonizingly slow. You couldn't get into a flow state. You certainly couldn't rack up 10,000 hours that way.
But Michigan was different.
Michigan had just installed one of the first time-sharing systems in the world. So instead of punch cards, you sat at a teletype terminal. You typed your code, and the computer responded instantly.
It was like moving from writing letters by quill to sending a text message.
Exactly. It revolutionized the feedback loop for learning. Bill Joy stumbled into the computer center, saw this, and he was hooked. But there was still a problem.
Money.
Computer time costs money.
Yeah.
Students were limited to a 1-hour budget per session.
And here comes the self-made heist.
Joy discovered a glitch, a bug in the software. He found that if he typed T equals K at the prompt, the system wouldn't charge him for the time. The clock would stop.
T equals K. That is the key to the kingdom.
It was. He literally lived in the computer center. He programmed 8 to 10 hours a day. He slept in the lab. Because of that specific university, at that specific year, with that specific bug, Bill Joy was able to accumulate thousands of hours of practice that almost no one else in the world could get.
So by the time he went to Berkeley, he was miles ahead of his peers. Not just because he was smarter, but because he had a time machine. He had already put in the hours.
We see the same pattern with the Beatles.
And now, don't tell me the Beatles were just lucky.
They were absolute geniuses, undoubtedly. But ask yourself, where did they get their 10,000 hours?
Liverpool. Playing the Cavern Club.
Oh, Hamburg, Germany.
The strip clubs.
The Indra Club in the Kaiserkeller. This was 1960. The club owners in Hamburg didn't want a refined 1-hour show. They wanted noise to drag customers in from the street. They made the Beatles play 8 hours a night, 7 days a week.
8 hours a night. That is grueling.
It's insanity. But think about what that does to a young band. They couldn't just play their 10 best songs over and over. They had to learn hundreds of covers. They had to learn how to engage a hostile, drunk audience for hours on end.
They had to experiment.
They had to develop stamina. They were forced to get good. Really, really good.
So by the time they came to America in 1964 for the Ed Sullivan Show,
They had performed live an estimated 1,200 times. Most bands today don't play 1,200 times in their entire career. Hamburg was their time-sharing system. It was a crucible that gave them an opportunity to practice at a volume no one else was getting.
and then, of course, there's the ultimate example of this. The richest man in the world for a very long time, Bill Gates.
Gates is the perfect storm. If you list the series of lucky breaks, the opportunities that fell into his lap, it's actually laughable. The comedy of advantages.
Let's run the list, because the narrative we all know is dropout genius invents industry.
Okay, break number 1. His parents send him to Lakeside, an elite private school in Seattle. The year is 1968.
Why does 1968 matter so much?
Because the Lakeside Mothers Club did a rummage sale and raised enough money to buy a computer terminal, an ASR-33 teletype.
In 1968, most colleges didn't have a computer terminal, and here is a middle school with one.
And it was a time-sharing terminal connected to a mainframe in downtown Seattle. So just like Bill Joy, a 13-year-old Bill Gates could program in real time.
So he starts racking up his hours. That's opportunity 1.
Break number 2, the Mothers Club money runs out. But it turns out one of the Lakeside parents works for a company called Computer Center Corporation, or C-Cubed. They need someone to test their software code on the weekends.
So they hire the Lakeside kids.
Exactly. Free, unlimited computer time in exchange for finding bugs.
Okay, that's break number 3.
No, that's still 2. Break number 3. C-Cubed goes bankrupt. But then Gates finds out that the University of Washington has a computer that's left free between 3:00 a.m. and 6:00 a.m.
So he sneaks out of his house.
He literally walks miles to the university in the middle of the night to steal free computer time.
Incredible. Break number 4.
A company called TRW realizes they have a major project in Washington and calls up a local programmer they know to fix a bug. He says, "I can't do it, but I know these kids at Lakeside."
So Gates gets pulled out of school.
For a whole semester in high school to write professional code for a massive corporation.
But by the time Bill Gates drops out of Harvard to start Microsoft, he hasn't just been dabbling in computers.
He had been programming practically nonstop for 7 consecutive years. He had way past his 10,000 hours. He was arguably the most experienced programmer of his age on the entire planet.
And look at the timing again. He was born in 1955?
Which is absolutely crucial. If he'd been born in 1950, he would have been too old. He would have missed the personal computer revolution. He'd have been an IBM mainframe guy.
And if he was born in 1960?
He would have been too young. He wouldn't have been ready to seize the moment in 1975 when the Altair 8800, the first microcomputer kit, came out.
Dates, Steve Jobs, Eric Schmidt, Bill Joy, they were all born between 1953 and 1955.
They were the perfect age to have their 10,000 hours ready, exactly when the world shifted to personal computing. It was a demographic jackpot.
So we have the ecology of timing when you were born. We have the ecology of opportunity, getting the access to the ice time or the computer terminal to get your 10,000 hours. But surely you have to be smart.
Intelligence matters, absolutely. But this is where we run into the threshold theory And this is maybe the most uncomfortable part of the research for a lot of people.
Because we love the idea of the lone genius, the Einstein, the person whose brain is just so powerful that they can't possibly fail.
Let me introduce you to Christopher Langan. Have you heard of him?
The name rings a bell. He was on a game show, right? 1 versus 100.
That's him. He's been featured in the media as the smartest man in America. His IQ is reported to be somewhere between 195 and 210.
For context, Einstein's was estimated around a 150, so Langan is statistically off the charts.
He's a cognitive anomaly. He started speaking at 6 months old. He taught himself to read at age 3 just by looking at comic books. In high school, he could skim a textbook 5 minutes before a test and get a perfect score.
I heard he took the SAT and fell asleep during the test.
And still got a perfect score. The story is true.
So, by the logic of self-made success, this guy should be curing cancer. He should be the head of NASA. He should be changing the world.
You would think. But today, Christopher Langan lives on a horse farm in rural Missouri. For most of his adult life, he worked as a bouncer at a bar. He worked in construction. He's been working on this grand theory of the universe, the cognitive theoretic model of the universe, for decades. But he can't get it published in any academic journal.
Wait, the smartest man in America is a bouncer. What on earth happened?
To understand Langan, we have to compare him to someone else. Let's look at Robert Oppenheimer, the father of the atomic bomb.
Also a certified genius.
Definitely. But look at their college experiences. Langan got a full scholarship to Reed College, a very prestigious school. But his mother, who was from a very poor, unstable background, she failed to fill out the parents' financial statement correctly.
A paperwork error.
Just a bureaucratic mistake. The university pulled his scholarship. Langan tried to explain the situation. He went to the administration. But they wouldn't budge. He felt like nobody cared, so he just dropped out.
Okay, but he tried again, right?
He did. He went to Montana State. And this is the part of the story that just breaks your heart. He was living 13 miles out of town. One winter, the transmission in his old car broke. He couldn't get to his 8 early a.m. class.
Terry asked for a transfer to a different section.
He went to his advisor and asked to move the class to an afternoon slot so he could hitch a ride with a neighbor. A totally reasonable, simple request.
And the advisor
said no. Request denied. Langan saw this as the final straw. He decided the entire higher education system was rigid and broken and wasn't for him. He dropped out again and never went back.
Now, contrast that with Oppenheimer.
Oppenheimer went to Cambridge for his PhD in physics. He was brilliant, but he was also emotionally unstable. He was struggling with the experimental work. At one point, his tutor, Patrick Blackett, was pushing him too hard.
And Oppenheimer snapped.
He did. He actually took chemicals from the lab and tried to poison an apple, which he then left on Blackett's desk for him to eat.
Oh, wait. He tried to kill his professor?
Literally attempted murder, and the university found out about it.
So Langan drops out because of a broken transmission. Oppenheimer tries to murder his tutor. Oppenheimer must have been expelled, arrested, something.
No, Oppenheimer's powerful parents came in. They negotiated with the administration. They used their influence. Oppenheimer was put on probation and told he had to see a psychiatrist.
Yeah.
That was it.
That is infuriating. It's completely unfair.
It is. But what's the difference here? It wasn't raw IQ. Langan probably has a higher IQ than Oppenheimer ever did. The difference is something called practical intelligence.
Knowing how to talk to people, knowing how to navigate the system and get what you want.
Exactly. Oppenheimer possessed a skill set that allowed him to talk his way out of a murder charge. He knew how to handle authority. He possessed what the sociologist Annette Leroux calls a sense of entitlement.
And this isn't entitlement in the negative sense, like being a brat.
No, not at all. It's the sense that you have a right to be heard, that you can customize your environment to suit your needs. And Leroux found that this comes directly from parenting styles.
She studied this, right? She followed families around.
Yes. She found a massive divide between middle and upper class families and poor and working class families. The wealthier parents practiced what she called concerted cultivation.
They shuttle the kids to soccer and piano and debate club.
But more importantly, they talked to their kids as equals. They reasoned with them. They encouraged them to question authority. There's this great example of a 9-year-old boy, Alex Williams. His mother takes him to the doctor.
I remember this from the book.
The doctor's talking, and Alex just interrupts him. He says, "I'm not 10, I'm 9. And then he starts asking the doctor detailed questions about the bumps on his arm. He treats the doctor like a peer, a consultant. He isn't intimidated.
Because his parents have taught him that the doctor works for him. He's a customer.
Now, contrast that with the accomplishment of natural growth parenting style that Leroux found in poorer families. These parents love their kids just as much, but they view the world differently. They teach their kids to defer to authority. You don't question the teacher. You don't challenge the doctor.
So the kid learns to be passive with institutions.
Exactly. When the institution says no, the working class kid accepts it as a final judgment. When the institution says no to the wealthy kid, they see it as the start of a negotiation.
And that was Christopher Langan's tragedy. He grew up in extreme poverty. He had an abusive stepfather. No one ever taught him how to speak to a university administrator. No one taught him that he could challenge the rules.
So when the transmission broke, he didn't have the practical intelligence to solve the social problem. He had the raw processing power to understand the universe, but he lacked the social software to get a college degree.
This leads directly to the threshold theory.
Right. The theory that IQ is like height in basketball. To play in the NBA, you have to be tall. If you're 5'5", you are probably not making it.
Right. There's a minimum requirement.
But once you hit a certain threshold, say 6'6", being 6'8" or 6'10", doesn't necessarily make you a better player.
Yeah.
Other things start to matter more. Your speed, your agility, your court vision, your ball handling skills.
And with success in life, the threshold for IQ is about 120.
Once you are smart enough, once you can handle the cognitive load of a complex job success, becomes about those other things. Your practical intelligence, your creativity, your social skills, and your ecology. Nobel Prize winners come from Holy Cross and Gettysburg College, not just Harvard and Yale.
I want to dig into that creativity bit for a second because the research mentions divergence testing.
Yes, this is a great way to separate raw IQ from imagination. We're used to convergence testing, like Raven's matrices, where there's only one right answer. But divergence testing asks you to be creative. For example, the test is, how many uses can you think of for a brick?
So someone with a high IQ but low creativity might say building a wall or a doorstop.
Right. Very functional, very literal. In the study Gladwell cites, they compared two students. Florence, who has a sky-high IQ, says things like building things and throwing. Very limited.
And the other student?
A student named Poole. He says, use it as a paperweight, grind it up for red pigment, break a window, use it as a weapon in a game of Russian roulette.
Okay, that is dark, but definitely creative.
Exactly. Poole has a fertile mind. He can see possibilities where Florence only sees rules. And that ability to see possibilities is often what we confuse with genius. It's not just processing speed, it's imagination. And imagination is often a product of feeling safe enough and entitled enough to explore those boundaries.
It's tragic to think about Langan on that farm. It feels like such a waste of potential.
It is, and it reinforces the idea that we can't just rely on talent will out. Talent needs a conduit. It needs a structure to carry it to fruition. Langan didn't have the structure. Oppenheimer did.
So we have covered the when timing, the opportunity, 10,000 hours, and the social skills, practical intelligence. But there's another layer to this ecology, and that is culture, specifically the culture of your ancestors.
This is where we look at the strange and fascinating case of the elite New York Jewish lawyers.
We're talking about men like Joe Flom, a partner at Skadden, Arps, one of the most powerful corporate lawyers in history.
The story of Joe Flom is usually told as a classic American triumph, a story of grit over anti-Semitism. He was a fat, awkward Jewish kid who grew up in the Depression. He couldn't get a job at the fancy white shoe firms on Wall Street because they didn't hire Jews.
So he started his own firm and hustled his way to the top.
And that is true, but it is not the whole truth. It misses the ecological advantage. Being excluded from the white shoe firms turned out to be the greatest stroke of luck in his entire life.
Because of the type of work that the white shoe firms did, and more importantly, the work they didn't do.
Precisely. In the 1940s and 50s, the big established firms, the ones run by the gentlemen of New York society, did what they considered dignified work. They handled taxes, bond issues, corporate filings.
Right.
They did not do litigation. That was seen as messy, unseemly, and they definitely did not do hostile takeovers.
A hostile takeover was considered ungentlemanly. It is simply not done. It was seen as barbaric.
Right. So if a corporate raider needed a lawyer to help them take over a company, the big firms turned up their noses. So who did they go to?
They went to Joe Flom.
They went to the small, scrappy Jewish law firms who were desperate for any work they could get and couldn't afford to be picky. So for 20 years, Joe Flom and his colleagues were doing the scraps. They were fighting in the trenches of proxy battles and corporate litigation.
They were getting their 10,000 hours in the one specific area of law that the entire establishment ignored.
And then the world changed. The 1970s hit, the culture of business shifted. Suddenly, hostile takeovers became the norm. Every Fortune 500 company was either trying to buy someone or trying not to be bought.
And suddenly, they all needed a lawyer who knew how to fight.
And the white shoe firms didn't know how. They were total beginners. But Joe Flom, he was the master. He had been doing this stuff for 2 decades. The very thing that made him an outcast, his background, positioned him perfectly when the market shifted.
It is the exact same pattern as Bill Gates. He was doing the thing nobody else cared about, programming for nerds or hostile takeovers for corporate raiders, until the moment the world decided that thing was the most important thing.
And there's another layer here, the demographic trough.
We're back to birth years again?
We are. Joe Flom and his contemporaries, the founders of Wachtell Lipton, for example, were almost all born around 1930.
Why is 1930 the magic number for being a New York lawyer?
Because of the Great Depression. Families stopped having kids. So the generation born in the 1930s was exceptionally small.
So when they got to school, the classes were smaller.
Smaller classes, more attention from teachers, brand new schools were being built. And when they graduated law school in the mid-1950s, the economy was booming, but there were very few new lawyers entering the market.
Supply and demand, low supply of workers, high demand for talent. It was a golden ticket.
Exactly. Now contrast that with Mort Janklo's father, Maurice. Maurice was born in 1902. He was brilliant, highly educated, but he graduated right into the teeth of the Great Depression.
Awful timing.
It didn't matter how smart he was. The ecology crushed him. He ended up destitute. His son, Mort, born in that lucky trough of the 30s, became a tycoon. Same gene pool. Different timing.
It is so humbling. You realize how much of what we call success is just riding a wave that you had no part in creating.
But there's one more lesson from the Jewish lawyers, and it's about the garment industry.
This part I love. It's about the value of different kinds of work. Because Joe Flom's parents weren't lawyers or bankers. They were garment workers.
Right. And we tend to look at that kind of work sewing aprons, making dresses in a small shop, as drudgery. But for the Jewish immigrants in New York, it was actually something very special.
We have the story of Louis and Regina Borgenicht. They came from Europe with absolutely nothing. They noticed no one was selling aprons for children, so they started sewing them in their tiny apartment.
And they sold them on the street. And here's the key. This work had 3 specific qualities that make work meaningful.
Let's break those down.
First, complexity. It wasn't just pulling a lever in a factory over and over. They had to source the cloth, design the pattern, manufacture the item, and then go out and market it. It engaged their minds.
Second quality.
Autonomy. They were their own bosses. They weren't taking orders from anyone. They decided when to work and how to work.
And third.
The direct connection between effort and reward. If they stayed up late and sewed more aprons tonight, they made more money tomorrow. That feedback loop is psychologically crucial.
This is what sociologists call meaningful work.
Exactly. Compare that to being a tenant farmer in Europe or a peasant. You work all day, but the landlord takes most of the profit. There is no connection between your effort and your reward. You learn helplessness.
So the garment industry was a school.
It was a school for entrepreneurship. The children of these garment workers, like Joe Flom, grew up watching their parents solve complex problems and reap the rewards. They absorbed the lesson that if I apply my mind and my effort, I can shape my own future.
And the genealogy study by the sociologist Louise Farkas proves this, right?
It's amazing. She looked at these family trees, and the pattern is almost a law of physics. The immigrant grandfather is a garment maker, the son goes to law school, the grandson is a doctor or a partner at a top law firm.
So it's not that they succeeded despite their humble origins. They succeeded because those specific humble origins taught them the cultural lessons of autonomy and complexity needed to thrive in a modern economy.
They had a cultural legacy of meaningful work. Which brings us to our final section. We've talked about how culture can propel you forward, but culture can also hold you back.
We are going to Harlan, Kentucky.
The Die Like a Man chapter. This is about the culture of violence.
Harlan, Kentucky in the late 19th century was one of the most violent places in the developed world. We're talking about blood feuds, the Howards versus the Turners.
It sounds like something out of a Western movie. Shootouts in the courthouse, ambushing entire families on the road, all-out clan warfare.
Over 1,000 murder indictments in one small region over a few decades. The question is, why? Why was this specific group of people so incredibly prone to violence?
It wasn't random. It goes back to where their ancestors came from.
The Scotch-Irish.
Right. The people who settled the Appalachian Mountains came from the borderlands of northern England, Scotland, and Ireland. These were rough, lawless, violent places. But crucially, their economy was based on herding animals.
This is the key distinction. Herdsmen versus farmers.
Think about it. If you're a farmer, you grow corn. You rely on your neighbors to help you build a barn or bring in the harvest. You don't have to worry about someone stealing your entire livelihood in the middle of the night. It's very hard to steal 50 acres of corn.
So you learn to be cooperative.
Exactly. But if you're a herdsman,
Your livelihood is sheep or cows. They can walk away, they can be stolen in an instant by a rival clan.
so you have to be tough. You have to project an aura of constant threat. You have to make sure everyone in the surrounding area knows that if they mess with you or your family, you will destroy them.
You have to cultivate, it's called a culture of honor.
Right, a culture where a man's reputation is his only defense. You have to respond to every insult, every slight, no matter how small, with overwhelming aggression.
And that cultural script didn't just disappear when they moved to America.
It persisted for generations. And here's the wildest part. It persists today.
A hallway experiment.
The University of Michigan back in the 1990s. Two psychologists, Cohen and Nisbet, gathered a group of college students, half from the north, half from the south. They asked them to walk down a narrow hallway to drop off a piece of paper.
And they planted an actor in the hallway.
The actor is pretending to file something in a cabinet. As the student walks by, the actor slams the drawer shut, bumps into the student, and calls him an asshole.
A direct physical and verbal insult.
A clear challenge.
Yeah.
And then they measured the physiological and behavioral reaction.
What happened with the Northerners?
The Northerners, they basically laughed it off.
Yeah.
They were amused. Their cortisol levels, their stress hormones didn't move. They just thought it was a joke. What's this guy's problem?
But the Southern...
A total explosion. Their cortisol levels spiked. Their testosterone levels spiked. They became visibly angry. In follow-up tests, their handshakes were much firmer. They were primed and ready for a fight.
These are modern college kids. They aren't herding sheep. They're studying engineering or history. But the cultural script of their great-great-grandparents is still running in their blood.
It shows that we are all carriers of our history. You can't understand why someone succeeds or fails or gets into a fight in a bar without looking at the long shadow of their cultural past.
So when we zoom out and we look at the hockey players and the computer billionaires and the lawyers and the herdsmen, the self-made man starts to look like a ghost.
It is a fiction, a very pleasant and motivating fiction, but a fiction nonetheless. Success is a patchwork. It's a quilt woven from lucky birth dates, demographic troughs, powerful cultural legacies, and a series of extraordinary opportunities.
It doesn't mean we stop working hard.
No. You still need the 10,000 hours. Bill Gates worked harder than anyone. The Beatles worked harder than anyone. But hard work is necessary. It is not sufficient. You need the ecology to support and reward that work.
And that really changes the conversation, doesn't it? If success is so much about opportunity, then we have a collective responsibility.
Exactly. We can't just sit back and wait for the cream to rise to the top. We have to build the dairy. We have to look at the December-born hockey players and the Chris Langans of the world and ask ourselves, how many geniuses are we squandering because we haven't built the right ecology for them to thrive?
We need to keep the doors open longer, like those Danish schools you mentioned.
We need to realize that fairness isn't just treating everyone the same at the same time. It's understanding that people grow and develop differently, and ensuring that life-changing opportunity isn't rationed by something as arbitrary as a calendar date or a zip code.
So, to you, the listener, look at your own success or your struggles. Don't just look in the mirror. Look out the window. Look at the forest that grew you. And maybe ask yourself how you can help plant that forest for someone else.
A fascinating deep dive. Thank you.
Indeed. Thank you for listening. We'll catch you on the next one.